Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the In the 11 podcast. This is your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show where we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. We've kicked off the new year with a bunch of really cool episodes, and the players have been coming in from all around the world to come on and share their stories. This week's guest comes to us from Spain, where she's playing in the top flight against the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona. Natalie Muth steps into the 11 this week, and I love talking to her about her career thus far, her approach to the game, the gratitude and the grateful kind of approach that she takes towards everything that she's gotten in her career, which I think is refreshing to hear from an athlete who still wants to push and still has expectations, but more so comes from a place of feeling very grateful to have achieved what she has so far in the game and looking forward to see what she continues to do. If you want to support the show just a little bit extra and you want the content a day before anybody else receives it, patreon.com/in11pod. It is also down below as well. That would greatly be appreciated by yours truly, and it helps the show grow that much more. Without further ado, here is myself. All right, ladies and gentlemen, stepping into the 11 now, and joining us is Natalie Muth. And I'm sure it's a tough time because if I check the schedule correctly, I believe you have an upcoming game, a pretty big game against Barcelona in the coming week. So we greatly appreciate anyone that takes the time to come in and share their story, but especially you with everything going on. I'm sure it's not a slow time around the club right now. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
No, of course, I'm happy to be here.
So with that being said, when you hear something like that playing against Barcelona, right? Like for somebody like me who's been a fan of the game for so long, like when did it kind of shift for you of like seeing these clubs with this kind of history and this allure around their names to now it's just, this is my opponent week in and week out?
Yeah. Actually my first full match that I played was this time last year against Barcelona. And
wow.
I don't think it hits you until you're lined up against them, like we're walking out with the referees and you're lined up against like the queens of football, you're standing next to Alexia Putellas and like, she's won like every award there is to win. And it's like, and you see the facilities, the fields are amazing. And it's like, I think that's the moment where it really hits you. It's like, wow, like, these are the people I watch on TV. Like it's so cool to be able to play against them.
Yeah. But I'm sure like it must be when, the whistle blows, right? Or you complete your first pass or whatever, like they're just, it shifts back into, it's what you've done your whole life, this is another match. This is another player that I'm playing against. And I'm sure you can't stay in that mode of kind of like looking at them and with the awe, so to speak.
Yeah. No, of course. I mean, once you're in the game, it's like you don't really think about who you're up against, but it's more the moment like lining up to play the game and like before when you're like, wow, this is like, it's a cool opportunity for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Were these kind of opportunities, as we'll kind of dive into here, your playing history and your career kind of up to this point, were these things that even, from a youth player that you were envisioning for yourself of kind of playing at this level, or was pro soccer always your dream growing up?
Yeah, it's funny, like maybe I'm different than a lot of the people you've interviewed, but it was never something that really I had ever wanted to do. Like I was always just with soccer, especially, it was always just like step by step for me, and I don't think it was until maybe my sophomore, junior year of college that I was like, maybe I want to keep playing, and see like my opportunities that are out there. But no, for me, it was like, it was never like my dream or passion to keep playing forever,
Yeah. No, I love that answer because I think people would be maybe shocked to learn that, every player doesn't have that story of like, oh, I knew I wanted to be a pro since I was 7 years old. Like there's a lot of them out there and we know them, but I was kind of in a similar situation where like, and for me, it was a little bit like where I grew up and you just sort of look at professional athletes as like this almost unattainable thing. At least for me, I was like, well, I can never be, doing what they're doing. And then I think like, as you mentioned there, as you kind of get a little bit higher in level, and then you start to maybe play with somebody who's played at this sort of level, and you're like, ooh, wait, I could maybe do this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Did that
No,
sort of start to happen for you like in college? Because I'm sure you were around, good players just consistently day in and day out and playing against amazing players
yeah.
too.
Yeah, no, it's funny, like, because I grew up in a small town, so then even when I was in high school, it was like I didn't know I could go to like the next college level until I like saw people
Mm,
doing that, and it was kind of the same thing like when I went to college, and I started hearing people like starting to play professional too, and it was like, you know, to have that like role model, I think is something that makes it a little bit more attainable for you,
yeah.
and to know like, oh, they did it, like, oh, okay, like I feel like I could do it too.
Yeah. So where did your kind of motivation come from, as a youth player or playing in high school? Like where did that motivation to kind of become one of the best players in your club, or, go on to play at a really high Division 1 level? Where did that kind of stem from?
Yeah, like I said, my town was super small that I went to high school, and there was like 8,000 people. But
Mm,
there was this one girl I played in high school with when I was a freshman, and she was a senior, and she was going to play for University of Portland. And I had always grown up watching them because I'm from like the Portland area, and
hmm
it was always like a dream of mine. But like you kind of touched on, like it always kind of felt like something that was like, I don't know if I could do it. Like it felt like
Yeah.
unattainable. Um, but to hear that she was going, it was like to me the most amazing thing ever. And that's when I was kind of like, oh, I'd like I want to go play for University of Portland. So
Yeah.
I think like she was a big role model for me at that age. And then she was actually the same one that ended up going to play professional because we played at University of Portland together, and she
hmm
ended up going to play professional. So for me, like she was, someone that made it seem all impossible for me too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's awesome to hear that, because like I said, I would sometimes, as a younger player, like see players that did that and think that they were somehow completely different than me and I wasn't going to be able to. But I think it's so cool to hear that you like saw that, and then instead of shying away from it, being like, yeah, I can go and do the same thing. And I think that's kind of that mentality that you need to have, like that, that aspiration, but as well, like we even spoke about in the beginning, like that confidence to go out and work hard and push to do it. So
Yeah.
was it like in high school for you, kind of, was it always sight set on University of Portland, or were there kind of other schools that you were had in the mix for that decision?
Yeah, no, I I spoke with I mean, I once I heard about her going and I had watched their games and everything, I was like, it's such a dream to like go and play there. And I actually ended up speaking with the coach pretty young. I think like halfway through my freshman year of high school.
hmm
So by that point I was that was when I first started even thinking about college soccer, and they were kind of the first school I talked to, and there wasn't really on the radar, there wasn't really anything else for me because I was just so excited to like be a part of this program.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, wow, as a freshman in high school was like your
Yeah.
first kind of contact. That's so that's so
Yeah.
kind of just mind-blowing to me to think about, like me or other athletes as freshmen in high
Yeah.
school, like. And I think I've talked to other athletes and on here obviously, and it seems crazy I think now to look back and be like, wow, we made one of the hugest decisions that we make at like, you know, that we'll ever make at like 17, 18 years old. Like, um,
Yeah.
it's so crazy. Like, do you ever
Yeah.
like think about that? And obviously I'm sure, you had, we'll talk about your experience kind of at Portland, but is there ever anything that you really look back on and regret, or anything like that?
Like as far as my soccer career has gone, I don't feel like I've ever had expectations for anything. So it's for me it's just like every step has been like, wow, I'm proud of myself like for achieving this goal. You know what I mean? Which is
Yeah,
maybe maybe
absolutely.
I don't know, is not the best way to answer that, but it's true. Like it really has been that way for me, and it's like every step I've loved and like I've really embraced, and I don't feel like I have anything that's like, oh, I wish I would have done that, or I wish I would have gone there. Like every
Mhm.
step that I've taken has given me so much.
Yeah. I think it's a healthy way to kind of look at the game, because I think sometimes when you set like too high expectations on yourself and then you can't meet them, there becomes this kind of internal struggle. But it's like a balance between, pushing yourself and also
Mhm.
like enjoying every day that you're out there in training and enjoying like each step that you've taken and kind of embracing that moment a little bit. Do you think like
Right.
that's definitely, I think that's something that's helped you kind of also now in the pro career as well, as like each time you're in these teams, like living in that moment a little bit?
Yeah. No, and I know so many people that they have their hearts set on playing for this team or this country or
Yeah.
getting whatever this for their salary, and it's like if you're not hitting those goals, you feel like you're constantly falling short, and it's like you're not like in the moment that you're in and appreciating what you have in front of you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like I think it's one of the fascinating things about just like sport in general and soccer is like like no matter what you're going to fail a lot. Like even just in the course of a game, like you're going to fail, consistently with certain touches, passes, shots, like things of that nature. And then
Hmm.
same thing with like a career. Like even if you are trying to push towards something, it's never a straight, clear and linear path. So I think was there ever times in your career where you were maybe met with that a little bit? I know you said sometimes you didn't quite have that high expectations that you kind of put pressure on yourself, but there was ever times where, you did kind of want something or you felt like you were pushing towards something and then maybe were met with adversity or kind of a setback.
Yeah, so I graduated in 2020, so that was like COVID times,
Mm,
and
yeah.
for me it was like I didn't have a specific place that I wanted to end up after that, or like a specific team, a specific country, but I had like a few ideas of like kind of where I could see myself ending up. And my first contract was in Kazakhstan. I don't know if you knew that, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I ended up like out in like Central Asia, which was not initially where I had hoped to be. Like I kind of wanted to stay a little closer to home, but I ended up like making the most of that experience, and I ended up loving every moment of it. And
Hmm.
it wasn't like, it was like a culture shock, but
Yeah, I'm sure.
but for me, like I still got a lot out of that. And I think if I had, like we were talking about, like if I had been so focused on like, oh, I didn't meet my goal, or like this wasn't where I wanted to be, then I think that could have been like a year wasted.
Yeah. Was What was that, even decision to kind of leave? Because growing up in Portland, or in the basically the Portland area, right, like small town right outside of Portland, and then going to University of Portland, like,
Yeah.
what are the feelings kind of graduating? Was it a feeling of, okay, I'm ready to kind of move on
Yeah.
and try something new, or was that hard to leave some place that's so near and dear to your heart?
Yeah. No, like the first time I left home was when I was in high school. I went to Germany for 3 weeks. And ever since this happened, I was so like, I want to go overseas again. Like
Mm,
I just loved it. Like I loved meeting new people. I loved being in a different country. I loved the new culture. And so for me, it was like, yes, I wanted to play for University of Portland, but it was like after that, I was like, I'm ready to go. Like,
yeah,
and I knew like for me, it wasn't, like I said, I was open to like a lot of different options at that time. And it was just like, whatever I kind of like felt excited about,
yeah,
I was just willing to go wherever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, so I've spoken to Jess who went to Kazakhstan as I think it
Yeah.
was same time as you. And then
Yes, yes, yes.
actually it should be coming out in a week or two, but I spoke to Brenna as well from that
Oh, I
Kazakhstan
did
team.
that. Okay.
Um and yeah, it's cool. Like I said to Brenna a little bit about this, like I I love that mentality because I think like I love sharing stories like that because I think so many people see the pro game as like the glitz and the glam, like the top of the top, right? And I
Hmm.
think there's so many players who like, in a position like you where it's you've graduated and you want to do this, so it's sort of like wherever I can get a little chance, wherever I can get my foot in the door and wherever I feel excited about, like that's where I'm going to
Yeah.
go. And
Yeah.
so many, barely any people could be able to pick out Kazakhstan on a map, right? And now
No,
like you're
yeah,
going
for
there
sure.
to
And
play
people will be like,
professionally.
"What? Where are you going?" Like, but yeah, no. So many people, even when that option came up, they were like, "Are you sure you want to take this?" And I was like, for me, I was just like, I get to play professional soccer. Like,
Yeah.
for me, it was like, that's so cool. And it wasn't about, like, at that point, it was obviously about the soccer part of it, but a lot of it was the travel, meeting new people. Like, that got me
Hmm.
excited as well. So for me to have something so different, like I was just all for it, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, and I definitely want to dive into that even more, but I wanted to mention too, I saw that you were so in college that you majored in civil engineering, correct?
Yeah.
So definitely not something that, I feel like a lot of college athletes, right? Like, because I mean, you can speak to this even better than me, right? The demands athletically on a Division I athlete are pretty high, whether it's in
Yeah.
season, off season, whatever.
Yeah.
And then to balance that with the academic rigor and workload of civil engineering, like, can you kind of put that into perspective for maybe somebody who's looking at school or even just trying to get an understanding of what it would be like to be a Division I athlete and also majoring in something like that?
Yeah. Here's the thing, like maybe it's not for everyone, like this this major to balance that with sports. But I'm the type of person, like I just thrive when I have a schedule and when I'm busy and have
Mm,
to stay on task, like I just do the best in those environments. And so for me, like maybe even if I had considered an easier major, like maybe I would have struggled more, you know? I don't know how to explain this, but it was I love having that routine. I love having to like get up and have to do something,
yeah.
you know? Um
Yeah.
but no, I
Yeah,
mean
I get
obviously
that.
it was a lot. Like it was yeah.
Yeah, I get that because I think, you know, the more kind of idle time that you have, sometimes it feels like the more your mind can just go crazy, right? And the more kind of you can add some
Hmm.
structure into your day. I understand that
Yeah.
that like helps guide you a little bit and gives you some purpose throughout each and every day. I think I do some research for these every time before I like interview a player, and I think I saw kind of like just scrolling through some of your socials and stuff that a professor like very early on in your collegiate career was like, "Hey, maybe you should rethink this major."
Yes,
Was that
yes,
a
yes.
conversation that happened?
It was a conversation that happened. Yes, I remember so clearly. It was like my first course that like kicked my butt, you know. I was taking
Hmm.
physics 1 and at the semester I was I was struggling, you know. Like it was I think actually it was after my first exam. And I went to speak with my professor and I was like, you know, I care a lot about like my grades, probably more than I should. So I was like, you know, distraught about this bad grade that I got. And he was like, you
Yeah,
know, maybe you should reconsider the major that you got yourself into. And I was like, I remember leaving that conversation and being like, that's not how that was supposed to go. And I was like, you know, like I never went back to his office and I just put my head into the books and I was like, I'm just going to prove you wrong. Like, and for this
yeah,
reason, I feel like I was so determined to get my degree that I was just like, to just walk away and be like, kind of like, screw you, you know? Like,
yeah, yeah.
like
It's
who
like
would encourage like a freshman, you know, who's here trying at least?
yeah, exactly. Like it's almost like that athlete mentality kind of like kicked in as soon as he said that, and it was like,
Yeah.
I don't think that you should do this, and you were like, actually, no. So,
Actually, yeah. No, for
so
sure.
I imagine that then has to be a hugely rewarding experience to finish those 4 years and graduate, and on multiple different levels. Right now, you kind of potentially have an opportunity to go and pursue something amazing like professional soccer, and
Mhm.
also have this amazing degree that you really
Mhm.
worked for from start to finish.
Yeah. You know, I had like many conversations before I graduated with professors that I respected. And it was like, you know, this feels like a career that I need to dive into. Like all my classmates already had their jobs lined up, they already had these internships, and I just felt so behind in that sense. But, you know,
Mm,
every professor that I trusted and respected, they said, no, go play soccer. They all said it. They all said it to me. And they were like,
yeah,
your career will be here. You have the rest of your life to do engineering. Like, don't worry, go play soccer. Like, and to me, that was like the best advice I ever received, you know, to just go and do something I was so passionate about and was dreaming about. Because I think if you, you know, if I'd given that up and gone straight into my career, I think I would have regretted that to this day, you know?
yeah, yeah. I always say like I think to me, like definitely regret is one of the scariest things. Like I think, even if as a player you don't get to the heights that you want to, or it doesn't wind up being exactly what you hoped, at least you know that you went and you gave it your best effort. And like you said,
Right.
it's a pretty decent fallback plan to have when you have an engineering
Yeah.
degree like that. Like, okay, if it really gets too tough, like I've got an
Yeah.
okay outlet. And that kind of answered my question. I was curious about that. Like, I'm sure some of the professors are giving you good advice, but I imagine like classmates maybe kind of are like,
Mhm.
wait, really? Like you did all this and now like,
Yeah.
and correct me if I'm wrong as well, but I have to imagine like that first pro contract money is probably a little different than like a first engineering job kind of money out of college. So like I wonder like, kind of our peers and classmates, like,
Yeah.
you're doing what now?
No, yeah, for sure. And like, yeah, definitely. But for me, like, it was never about the money, and it was like,
Yeah.
like it was rewarding to get this degree, and like you said, like it's a great fallback plan, like when I decide to retire and maybe go get a master's or continue studying engineering. But no, like I don't have any regrets as far as like deciding to go and play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is that process like kind of when you figure out, all right, I think I want to go and play. Um, maybe walk me through like what's even step one of like kind of, all right, I'm going in that direction towards playing, or maybe a little bit of those things. Like, 'cause I think players would be really interested to know, like, I think a lot of players graduate and they finish that senior year and they want to
Mhm.
play, but they're like, all right,
What do
what
I
do I
do?
what do I do next?
Yeah. And that was me too. Like, I knew absolutely nothing. Like, I didn't even know what teams really were good. I didn't know really what countries were good. I didn't know what I should be looking for salary wise.
Mm,
Um, and the biggest thing for me is agents. Like, there's just so many out there. There's so many that are
yeah.
hard to trust. But I think, I found my way just asking questions, getting my foot in the door, like speaking to as many professionals as I could, like,
Mm,
find, I guess. Like, I would, I'd reach out to random people who had this agent I was looking at, or who were playing for like a club I had an offer from. Um, but I mean, I myself have gotten a ton of these Instagram messages, from players looking to go overseas
yeah.
too. And like, my biggest advice is, like, it's not weird. Just message, like,
Yes.
everyone's used to it, like, just message people, ask questions. Like, it's the best way to figure out kind of your path, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you think because I think agents is a really important topic, right? And a lot of times agents
Mhm.
can be really helpful in getting you opportunities or getting you a connection to a club. But where do you think the balance is between kind of, because we all know players that are like, my agent handles everything. Like I don't,
Mhm.
I don't worry about where I'm going to play. My agent will tell me, right? And I think
Yeah, yeah,
there has to be more of a balance, right? Like you want your agent to be working for you, but you also probably want to be doing things as well, just to make sure that like
yeah.
everything is squared away and you have somewhere to play.
Yeah. No, and I know, I think every player treats it a little bit differently, but I think I'm probably the most, as far, I've switched agents before, but the agent I have now, like, I have a great relationship with him.
Hmm.
He's in Barcelona pretty often. So I'm like pretty hands on with, telling him what I want from a contract, what I expect, like where I want to be,
Yeah,
where I want to go, like if I want to change, if I'm happy, like I'm very, I was even texting him today, like we speak all the time. but,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I also understand, like, a lot of people don't have this relationship with their agent, and they're fine with that, and it's just, whatever works for you, I think.
yeah. And you mentioned too, like it's tough to find agents that you can trust because, like you said, there's a
Hmm.
lot of ones out there that are untrustworthy. Like, what
Hmm.
could be some of the things that maybe you've even seen in your own kind of conversations with agents, or
Yeah.
maybe things to maybe green flags and red flags, I guess, if you will, when it comes to
Yeah.
agents?
um the biggest red flag that I probably learned the hard way is you should never pay upfront. Like, you should never pay an agent upfront, and especially like
Yes.
large sums of money. If anything, it should be whatever, a couple hundred if you want them to work with them or something like this. But you should never
Yeah.
be paying a lot before they even got you anything. So
Hmm.
this was one lesson I learned. Um, Green flags are just, I think it's more of like intuition. Like,
Yeah.
if you feel good with them, if you feel confident. Um, but I mean, until they really find you. It's hard to build that trust until they really find you a contract. Like that's just
Yeah,
how it is, you know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So was the so obviously it sounds like different agent that got you kind of that first opportunity
Hmm.
to go over to Kazakhstan, correct? Like the first
Yeah.
agent you ever worked with?
Yeah.
Okay. And and I think you already spoke to it a little bit, but what was the first pitch kind of when you heard that was like the one on the table? Was that just was it immediately met with like, "Ooh, okay, that sounds interesting," or was it kind of like, "Wait, I'm going to go where now?"
Yeah. You know, all agents are salesmen, and that's just the truth of it. Like, and
They
they
really
can make
are.
anything sound like you've struck gold. Like, and I
Yep.
think like he was able to pitch like, and it ended up being great. You know, like it was great for me, and we got to play Champions League twice because of the COVID year, and that was basically how he pitched it to me.
Hmm.
Um, and this team had a ton of Americans on it, so it made the transition a lot smoother. And he had mentioned that, but you know, like you just got to be careful. Like in the end, it's a business, and agents are looking out for themselves, and they don't make money until you go somewhere. So they aren't looking out for you. You know, they want the money, and
Yeah.
so it's like you just have to be cautious about these things. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I mentioned that balance between like kind of the player advocating for themselves and then also the agent too, because
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, like they're gonna do what's best for their own interest. And sometimes the reality of that too is like if they have multiple other players that they represent, like
Yeah.
if one player is up for a big contract, like and that's not really you, they're
Hmm.
probably going to focus a little bit more of their time and energy into that player. And
For
it's
sure.
not always necessarily personal, like you said, for them it's just it's kind of business. It's how they feed their family, it's how they put a roof over their head, so they're
For
probably going
sure.
to often go after that bigger paycheck a little bit. And
For sure.
that sometimes means you got to kind of just advocate for yourself more and put yourself out there a bit more.
Right. And then many of the things I've heard as far like many of the agents in the States and a lot of my friends that have worked with them, it's like they just want the first opportunity that comes up, they want you to take it so that they don't, you know, then their job is done and you have a team, like, and,
Yep.
you know, then they can walk away from the situation. So it's like, I don't know. There's no like one answer I can say, like, look for this in an agent, don't look for this, but just,
Yeah.
just be cautious. Like,
Yeah. No, it's good advice. So that Kazakhstan experience, like, can you talk to me a little bit about like maybe we can start with the footballing side of it. Like, I'm sure Champions League was a really cool experience. I think your first ever was it when you went to Scotland? Was that the first Champions League
the
experience that the team had?
so I signed right before my that team had made it to round of 16, and I my first Champions League experience was actually against Bayern.
Oh wow, okay,
Yeah, so we had played them once home and once away, from what I remember. Yeah,
wow. Like,
yeah,
and I think you spoke to it a little bit too with Barcelona and playing like was that the first moment kind of like playing a giant like Bayern Munich where it was like okay,
yeah,
I'm really here now. Like this is
yeah.
big and this is the moment.
No, it was cool, and like I had heard a lot about Bayern at that point, but it's funny I was so not in like I was aware of like NWSL and players in America, but I think I was so removed from like
Yeah.
European football that I for that it was like less of a shock. But playing against Barcelona, it was like, okay, now I like watch these players, I know these players, I know these teams, so it's like it's almost gotten more of like a, oh, this is cool, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Does
Yeah.
there feel like there was difference like what were some of the differences that you noticed in playing college soccer to then like going over and playing and I'm sure you saw all kind of spectrums of it because I think I remember hearing a little bit about like the Kazakh domestic league like has quite a bit of variability in terms of level, but then also you're experiencing Champions League where you're experiencing world class players. Like, were there
Yeah.
anything kind of that you really noticed as big differences between the States and Europe?
Yeah, those are kind of two separate things. So I'll talk about the difference between States and Europe. But the
Yeah.
States is a very specific style. Like from what I've learned just from where I've been, like the States has very athletic players, strong, fast. Like it's a very physical game.
Mm.
And then leaving, and I've seen this like in Spain and in Kazakhstan, and the players are very technical. They're very smart. They play more together. It's not so much just like 1v1 attack, you know, like this.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the difference in the Kazakh league, it was like it it was hard because we did have like a good team while we were there, you know. Our
Yeah.
team beat, but the range in that league was so noticeable, like from top to bottom, you know. I think we probably outscored the other teams maybe by 100, like at the end, by the end of the season, you know. We would win
Yeah.
games 20-0, 16-0, like um so we were always kind of trying to play against men's teams to try to prepare for that. We spent
Okay.
a lot of time in Turkey playing against teams when we could, just to try to prepare for Champions League as best as we could. But I think that was one of the biggest challenges with that club for sure. Is I think they could have done well if they had a better week to week game, but they just didn't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that feel almost like surprising, kind of? Like, I'm sure there's a level of expectation going into Kazakhstan, maybe from what players or agents have told you about it,
Yeah.
but is that like almost surprising to kind of go from like college where you have like amazing facilities and fields and all this
Mm-hmm.
support and like every game for the most part is competitive, right? And then like I'm sure some of the pitches that you're playing on in Kazakhstan are like, what is going on here? And like you said, you're winning 16-0. Like,
Yeah.
was that kind of what you had anticipated going into that?
Um, I did my research kind of going into Kazakhstan, so knew what to expect as far as the league goes, and
Hmm.
the facilities and things like this. But yeah, the truth is, like in college, like Division 1, they just have it's just nicer than a lot of places, even like top European clubs. I'm sure like the top Division 1 teams have better facilities
Yeah.
than them. You know, like we're just so lucky to have what we have in America, like a competitive Division 1 league with lots of money in their programs. Like it's something like you're just not aware of until you go overseas and see it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think like what I think some players maybe sometimes like when they go to that first opportunity and they're like, wow, my college was better than this. And I think sometimes what like people forget is all that money that's going like to you to play, to pay your salary, like in college, that's all going back into the school
Mm-hmm.
and back into the facility and like
Mm-hmm.
paying salaries for trainers and physios and things like that. So it's like, it's just kind of that trade-off, and like you said, there's the top where they still have the amazing facilities and they also can pay everybody, but it's like, do you want to get paid, or like do you want to
Yeah.
have that college kind of experience where everything's pretty but there's not that same, it's not
Yeah.
pro.
Yeah. And you know, even the top clubs, a lot of the money comes from the men's side because the truth is there's just not a lot of money in women's football like overseas. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is what it is.
So then talk to me about maybe how did Spain come about? How did that come up on your radar after some of your time in
Yeah.
Kazakhstan? Was that something that you were looking at, or?
No, I mean, I knew Spain was a good league, obviously, but it wasn't it wasn't actually the move that I was wanting to make. But one of my teammates from Kazakhstan left to go play for this club in the north of Spain, Eibar, for first
Hmm.
division. And she was actually a big help in getting me my second contract because, I mean, if there's anything I've learned, it's all about the contacts you make, the people you meet along the way. And at the end of the day, those are the ones like vouching for you and helping you make these moves. And so this teammate really helped me a lot in finding this next contract. And
Mm.
her, like alongside my agent, he did a great job in that too. So
So then was like, I know you said there was like kind of another opportunity that you were looking at and maybe it didn't quite fall through. Was what made it a decision, or a decision that you wanted to kind of pursue to actually go play in Abar and play for Spain? What were some of the things that kind of excited you about that?
I mean, I didn't have any concrete offers on the table, but this was the first one that I mean, I remember the FaceTime call and it with the coach from Avar and her giving me an offer, and it was just like my first moment where I felt like, okay, this is like what I
Mm.
wanted. You know, I felt like I really achieved like a big goal for me there, like to go and play for the first division in Spain. It was like this was a big step for me, you know, and it felt right like in that moment to say yes and go. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to imagine that like is super. It's super like maybe not validating isn't quite the right word, but like you said, like there's just a moment of kind of just excitement and like joy to because and not to put anything against the Kazakh league because that's
Yeah, no,
still
yeah,
like playing Champions League and stuff like that, but
yeah,
there's just a kind of a different ring when you hear Spain and you hear like top flight and as we've already
yeah.
kind of laid out in the episode so far, like some of the teams that you're playing against, some of the players that you're playing against, and is there ever like a moment kind of where you look at sort of the whole arc of your career, like you said, growing up in kind of a small town in Portland, and then going to University of Portland, but then now like kind of being on the stage that you're on now, is there ever a
Mhm.
moment where you kind of look back and reflect on it with uh, I'm trying to find the right words for it, but just like kind of amazement a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just more feel like so much gratitude and like so
Mm,
thankful. Like I feel that all the time. Like I'm really happy to be where I'm at, and I'm, like I know that this is an opportunity that a lot of people don't get. I'm one of very few Americans that have a contract here in Spain, and it's like I don't know if it's like amazement, but like definitely gratitude. Like I feel that all the time.
yeah. Is there anything that comes up like via, playing in a foreign country, working in a foreign country, living in a foreign
Mhm.
country that maybe is a little bit difficult for, a foreigner or an American that maybe people
Mhm.
might not know about, whether it's, visas or kind of getting accommodation, like things like that? What are some of the maybe it's even, more off the field stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's many things like going to a new country that
Yeah.
become like a barrier, but no, I've had visa problems and stuff too, but normally like as far as like visa and housing, that's something you should be working with your club on. Like normally it's not just all up to the player to figure out all of those things. um but I mean, language barrier is like that's always going to be one of
Yeah.
the biggest factors. It's it's always hard to be thrown into that at first, and not being able to communicate with like half your team. And it's just a whole
Yeah.
different way of having to play and having to like, I don't know, go about your day to day with your teammates.
When you first signed in Spain, what was kind of the mix of players maybe that you had? Was it, predominantly Spanish players, so like
Mhm.
you were trying to learn Spanish, or were there like, players from all over the world? Like, because I know some clubs, even though, they might be located somewhere, if they have so many players from all over, sometimes English does become the language that is
Right.
used.
Right. No, and in Kazakhstan, really, it wasn't an issue because I had so many Americans and my coach spoke
Yeah.
like perfect English. But I think A-Bar was the first time where it was like, oh, maybe I need to learn a little bit of Spanish because
Yeah.
my coach didn't like all the trainings were in Spanish. I didn't have any other really internationals on that team. Like it was me and two other girls from Africa. Like we were the only ones really that spoke English. That was our first language. And in the north of Spain, they have their own language too. They speak Basque. So it's like
Oh my
it was
gosh.
always like I was always having to ask questions, get translated to, and it's just I don't know. I just get to a certain point where it's like I need to start learning the language, like because I just get frustrated. It's so hard to have people translate to you all the time to not be able to
Yeah.
communicate with the people on the field. Like, yeah,
Yeah, I think even for like the kind of social element of being a part of a team, it always you feel like that much more connected to the group when you can communicate with them. Even if
hmm
it's little things.
right.
What was your kind of way in which you went about learning Spanish? Like, was it something that the club set up, like with classes or something like that? Like, how did you kind of find your way into picking up Spanish?
Yeah, I had a really close Spanish friend, which helped a lot, and I don't know, just asking a lot of questions. Like if slowly you kind of start to pick it up, like I would learn kind of the basics on my own,
Hmm.
just on my computer. But just asking questions, like if you don't know what a word means, just ask like, what does that mean? And then over time, I don't know, like you can easily not learn a language too if you
Oh
just
yeah.
don't pay attention, if you don't try. But like for me, I just got so frustrated not being able to understand and not being able to speak that it was like okay, I need to learn. Like I just so I would focus every day. Like it's basically a lesson, you know. If you go to the pitch every day and you have three
Yeah.
hours of Spanish, it's like there's your Spanish lesson for the day.
How has it progressed now, having two seasons that you've played in Spain? Obviously, I know we'll mention about like different clubs, but how has it kind of progressed, like versus when you first landed?
Oh my gosh, it's like night and day. When I didn't even study Spanish in college, so I knew nothing. Like I knew hola, and that was it.
Wow.
Like, um, but now, so this like I just am coming up on a year in Spain, and it's like now I'm at the point where I don't need a translator in training. Like I can communicate like basic things with my teammate. I can understand like most conversations. So for me, it just makes it so much more comfortable when you
Oh
get to
yeah.
that point.
Yeah. And I think like I kind of think that is it's sometimes the most stressful way, but I almost feel it's the best way, kind of like the trial by fire sort of, where
Mm,
like, even I learned took Spanish like kind of all growing up through middle school and high school and some in college as well, but I wouldn't describe myself as fluent. But like,
mhm.
I'm sure you can attest to like being in it every single day. Every sign that you're reading is in Spanish. Everything,
Right.
even when you're taking public transportation, it's listening to it in Spanish. Like TV, like when you're kind of inundated with it, you just pick it up so much faster than just
Mhm.
studying it in these little blocks.
No, and it makes such a difference. And just having people like, because I mean, a ton of my teammates don't speak any English, so they just speak to you in Spanish, and
You gotta figure it out.
you have to struggle through at some point and like try to respond or you know. But I think like as far as languages, the easiest thing to make it stick is speaking and making mistakes. Like I can just remember so many mistakes I've made in Spanish that I'm like, okay, I remember that now, like
Yeah.
but just trying, like you have to just put in the effort a little bit.
Yeah. And so then, like, kind of in that first year where maybe you're stumbling through the language a little bit, but really starting to pick it up because you're so immersed in it,
Hmm.
growing accustomed to the culture of Spain, the football of Spain, like, what kind of transpired to like switching clubs and joining the club that you're with now?
Yeah, so the team I was with, I only did a half season, the second half of the season with them, and they actually ended up going down. They finished like bottom two, so they got relegated.
Mm,
Um, and that was like after that season ended, I was like, I would like to stay in Spain, and like I would like to stay first division. So that's kind of ultimately what made my decision to switch to the club I'm at now.
gotcha. And was
Yeah.
this at the time when you switched over and worked with a new agent, or was this still like kind of the previous agent?
I stopped working with my first agent after the Kazakhstan contract.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay,
So at the end of my
gotcha,
season in Kazakhstan is kind of when I broke it off with him and switched to another agent.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So how has now first half of the season, in Spain with this new club? Talk to
Hmm.
me. How has this season been going, and how do you feel like the team is performing? How do you feel like you're kind of playing on an individual level as well?
Yeah. I mean, coming up from being because this team finished, they won the league last year, so
Hmm.
they got moved up this year, and normally you expect them to kind of struggle, because it's a whole new league with some of the best teams in the world, and it's like, and they're coming off a winning season where the mentality just shifts. You come off
Yeah,
of winning a ton of games to now you're losing a lot of games. You're fighting to stay in the league or middle. Like you're expected to finish kind of towards the bottom of the table.
yeah,
So I think that has been like a hard transition in this team, but no, we're finished. I think we're ranked maybe 11th right now, so we're maybe fifth from the bottom, something like this. But so we're actually performing a lot better. We've had some good results against good teams. Um, yeah.
what was it like to have that shift from college, where like everything is still super competitive, but I think there's still kind of like there's a different, almost like comfort level, so to speak, like with college athletics, where it's like everyone wants to win for sure, but it,
Mhm.
it doesn't quite translate the same to like that pressure of professional clubs, where like
Mhm.
owners are putting investment money in, and they wanna see wins, right? Or they want to see promotions or avoiding relegation. Like you even
Yeah.
mentioned there, like coming up, and now the expectation is like, all right, we got to stay up. Like, and the teams that are at the bottom are doing everything they can
Mhm.
desperately to not go down. Like, have you kind of felt that? Is that energy like palpable when you're playing in some of these teams?
Yeah, I think I first saw it in A bar when it like because I joined the second half of the season and they were still kind of fighting for their spot, and my coach ended
Hmm.
up getting fired like for the last 2 months of the season, because they were desperate, and it
Wow.
it just is like that. They at a certain point they can't have any loyalties, and they're not afraid to make changes. They're not afraid to step on some toes, and so yeah, definitely there's a piece of that. Like there's investors that feel a lot of pressure, the owners of the clubs feel a lot of pressure for sure.
Does it ever feel like that too? Like just within the team and different, players like vying for certain spots and certain positions. Like, I know that you're a defender. Like, do kind of when you show up that second half of the season, that like, do players kind of look at you like, she about to take my spot? Like, am
Mhm.
I about to be kind of out of a starting job right now or something like that?
Yeah. No, there was a little bit of that when I showed up too, and I think it definitely created some conflicts, but everyone on the team, they're used to being professionals. They know how it is.
Yeah.
They know, and maybe they don't agree with the good decisions the coaches make, but it is like I think for the most part they respect it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, so I hesitate to ask just because even I know you kind of said like the way that you view your career is sort of like kind of with a sense of gratitude for where you've come from and where you are kind
Mhm.
of now. And I know you said like you look at some players that say, I want to play in this league or I want to play in this country. Like those are my check boxes that I want to hit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that you've kind of been in the pro game a little bit, like, is there anything that you do kind of look at as like, oh, it would be nice to kind of achieve this in my career or do this, that, and the other? Or is it still kind of that sense of almost like a flow state, just kind of taking what comes from the game that you kind of look at in terms of your career?
Yeah. No, I think it's like a balance because over time and once you hit like certain benchmarks, it's like, okay, I don't want to necessarily take a step back. So I think I have a certain level of where I want to stay, but I think I still have a very open mind as far as like where I would be
Mhm.
happy, where I'd want to go, like um so that it's changed a little bit over time, but I think I still have the same kind of mentality that I'm very open to many options.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned early on like that experience when you were younger, when you first traveled to Germany, that kind of like opened up your eyes to just travel and experiencing new cultures. Like,
Yeah.
and I was curious, like, do you know like how many countries it is that you've actually like played the game in? Like, and what are some of those experiences like? Or is it like too many to even count?
Um no, actually it's not to play in not that many.
Hmm.
Just but it's funny because you do see there is a different like each country kind of has its own style, its own way of playing. So, like I said,
Yeah.
in America, it's very, very physical, strong, fast, like high press, this type. And the Spanish league is very like, technical, very smart players, like very good on the ball. It's just, yeah. So, and the German league is like somewhere kind of in the middle of that. But yeah, it's funny because you definitely can see like the patterns as far as the different countries.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes it's cool to see how it almost reflects the culture a little bit, like the culture of the people. Like I always
Hmm.
found Germany to be like a very like efficient kind of
Hmm.
tactical. There's definitely a good level of technical ability in that country, but like I said, like
Yeah.
efficient and like it's about where to be, like and when to be there, and that's a little bit kind of like the German people, right? Like they're an efficient people, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and Spain I think is a little bit of like that creativity and
Hmm.
expressiveness that you talked about, like with the game and stuff like that. It's funny how sometimes it feels like football kind of reflects the culture of the people.
No, for sure. You can definitely see it. And like in America, we're very focused on like our work, we're getting our work done, like head to the
Yep.
ground, grinding type. And you can see it in the way we play too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we're gonna be athletic and we're gonna try and work you for 90 minutes until you don't want
Mhm.
to play us anymore. That's sometimes what you feel the mentality is.
Yeah.
But I'm sure with not only, like you said, there's a bunch of countries that you've played in, but also like I'm sure you've been able to travel as well, like whether it's
Mhm.
breaks, off seasons, things like that. Like,
Mhm.
what has that been like to, even if you kind of compare from like growing up in Portland and kind of staying in that area for a decent amount of time to now, like
Mhm.
just some of the stories that you may have or the places
Mhm.
you've been, cultures you've experienced, like what has that been like as an extra bonus of this career?
Right. No, it's so cool. And it's like it almost gets to the point where it's like addicting. Like it's like you almost
Yeah.
if I like sit in one place too long, it's like okay, time for the next. Like and that's just kind of how I feel like I'm living my life now. Like I get so excited to like go to a new country, like meet people from that country and I feel like even being on teams that I play for now, I'm constantly we're getting new transfers or people who live
Yeah.
different places and getting to know them and how they act and it's just yeah, like it's it's hard because I always thought like okay I'd play a couple years and then I'll go back home and get a job or something and now it's like okay well maybe 3 more years I don't know.
Yeah. I'm kind of having fun with this. I think I'm going to stick
Yeah,
with it.
yeah.
Can you give me like one or two, whether it's, it completely lives up to the hype type places, or maybe it's a little bit underrated that people need to go and visit? Like in all your travels, like what are some places that really kind of stand out to you?
Oof, that's a tough question. Oh, I mean, Spain lives up to the hype. It's amazing. Like every city
Yeah.
you go to, and like it's just a good time. Like I really enjoy living here. I really love the people, and there's so many parts to explore.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know. Every place I've stayed in long enough, I would say is like underrated. Like I would say that about. I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time in Turkey, and I loved it. Like I love.
Okay.
I just thought it was beautiful. And Kazakhstan, I would even say like I don't know if I would ever say like oh you have to go to Kazakhstan but like I really enjoyed my time there so like I don't know I think people get so focused on like the cities you see all the time that people are going to
Yeah.
and it's like there's so many places out there that are like just as beautiful just as cool and like more untouched and to me like the more I travel those kind of places appeal to me more less than like the big cities that you feel you need to check off your list.
Yeah. I think that happens with, whether it be players or just people that go and move over to Europe, is like,
Yeah,
you want to see the big cities, of course, like, and you'll
yeah,
probably hit them, but then you start to kind of venture out like a little bit. Like, I know I have someone I talked to on this show, and like, I think he said for a vacation, he went to Albania. Like, there were some amazing beaches or something in Albania, which is like
yeah,
never one that, us, we would ever kind of picture as like,
right.
that's a place to go to. But I think that's where you start to find the like hidden little gems.
No, for sure. And I think like the longer you're overseas, it's like, oh, where else can I go? Like it, and it kind of gets to that point of you just like
Yeah.
want to explore different places and different cities, and yeah,
Is there anywhere else that you kind of have maybe on your list for 2023 or beyond of some places that you're looking forward to visiting?
yeah. Um, this is the exact opposite of what we were just talking about. But I've never been to Greece, like, and I really like that is one that I've like always wanted to check off. And then one of my really close teammates now lives in Croatia, so I would like to go there this summer too. So that's
Okay.
kind of my goal. But yeah, not off the beaten path. Greece is like
But it's like you said, with Spain, it's, it lives up to the hype. So I'm
right.
sure Greece is there's a reason why it's so popular, right?
Yeah,
Like,
we'll see. We'll see. I hope.
awesome. Well, I mean, once again, thank you so much for taking some time. I'm sure it's going to be a busy week of training leading up to the game and kind of getting back in the swing of things. But I want to thank you, and I appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah, no, it's been nice. Thank you.
That is all for this week. Thank you to Natalie once again for taking time. I know she got a big game coming up at the time of this recording, so I'm sure things are busy. I appreciate her time. I appreciate her sharing her story with all of you. Thank you to all there who have continued to listen week in and week out. We cannot do this without you, without your support. It means the world to me. Continue to Spread the word about the podcast, follow the socials, check out the clips, repost them, share them, like them, all that good stuff. It helps the show grow just a little bit, and I can't thank you guys enough for all that you do on that front. I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.